well, welcome to everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We don't want to waste any of the precious time we have together, so we're just going to dive right into it. First, some introductions. My name is Joanna Bringhurst, and I am the state coordinator for Idaho. I've been doing National History Day for 4 years. I'm actually originally from Utah. I grew up in Utah and New Hampshire, but Boise is definitely my favorite place. But I've lived, and I love working out of the Idaho State Museum. So over in Nevada, we have Christine. Do you want to take a minute and say hello?
Yes, sorry, I had to unmute. Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Hull. This is my second time around being the History Day coordinator. So all in total, I think I'm at somewhere around 8 or 9 years, something like that. And I'm originally from Reno, Nevada, which is where I live, but I have lived in lots and lots of places. Back east, California, Vegas, Reno, all the places, but we keep coming back here.
Awesome. And Wendy from Utah?
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm the state coordinator in Salt Lake City, and I've been doing History Day for over 10 years as a coordinator. I got involved when I was in graduate school in Colorado and was in the state coordinator position there, and then was able to come back to it years later after we moved back to Salt Lake City, and I just absolutely love it. And I will also say, I think it's important for me to be totally honest, that my background and my training is in academic history. I was not trained as a teacher. I haven't done this with students myself. I am from the Egghead clan. But I love how this program brings historical skills and historical thinking to younger kids. So that's me.
Awesome. And we're really excited to be partnering together and bringing teachers from all over the West together. And we hope this will be a really great opportunity for you to connect with colleagues and in these other states who are doing really similar, awesome work with their students. And we want you to know we're in your corner and we're cheering for you as we go into the great unknown of the school year. And just a little bit of housekeeping. Using Zoom is always an adventure. We really want you to feel free to jump in and speak or put something in the chat. We really want this to be a collaborative experience, so don't be shy to just chime in, or if you're nervous about speaking over, just put, raise your hand in the chat, and we're happy to have all of us participating together. We are recording, and so what you see in the camera will appear in the gallery, and we really appreciate it if you're able to have your video on so we can kind of get to know you better. It's just a little bit easier to feel connected when we can see each other. You don't have to be muted unless you have fun things happening at your house, or if anyone there is actually in an office, good for you, or a classroom, yay. But for most of us, we're at home, so just kind of be mindful of the sound. And we invited you to the course using a platform called Canvas. It came to you in an email from either Wendy or Christine or I. And when you sign up, you can access the pre-work and then all of the materials that we'll cover in this session, all the tools, all the slides, you'll have access to in the course materials. And then any homework assignments, if you're doing this class for credit, you'll see those in Canvas. So if you have any questions about Canvas or any issues, just put those in the chat and we'll make sure that we talk about those things. Any questions before we just get going? Okay, here we go. So today we're going to cover kind of how National History Day began. We'll talk about the process, the research process National History Day students go through to create their projects. We'll cover the contests and how the categories work. And then we'll just briefly touch on the rules and rubrics that we use as part of those contests. And then we're going to highlight storytelling in history and what an important part the narrative is that your students are building in making their historical argument, making it more of a storytelling experience. And then we're going to highlight today the paper category, and hopefully you saw in Canvas a few papers to read. We'll talk about those a little bit at the end. If you didn't get a chance to read them in advance, that's okay. We'll still have a good time talking. So let's get into it. Let's talk about how National History Day began. So National History Day really got started at Case Western Reserve University during the height of the Vietnam War. There were professors at Case Western who were really concerned about our involvement in the war and were hoping that maybe we as a country had learned some lessons from history that would prevent us from getting involved in a conflict like that. So they looked around and really wanted to consider how are we as Americans teaching our own citizens about our history. And what they saw was not great. We really have, sorry, there's so many beeping sounds. We haven't really done a good job in the past. Memorizing dates and locations isn't a great way to understand history, and so they started National History Day in response to those challenges. Somebody is having a lot of house. Feel free to mute. I think I can do it for you if I figure it out. Okay, I'll just mute everyone. Fun. I didn't know I could do that. Okay, great. Moving forward, Christine. So that's how National History got started, and that was nearly 40 years ago. We want to talk next about how the National History Day process unfolds. So it's really important for you when you're considering how you're going to work through this process with your students to look at to do some backwards planning, right? Christine, it's just moving on its own. That's okay. Okay, so the National History Day process is really flexible and open to customization for you in your own classroom. So that's one of the really great things about National History Day is that whatever you're doing, you can make it work for you. Obviously, this year is totally bonkers. And so if you are new to National History Day, or if you've been doing it for a long time, you're probably figuring out your own new schedule and how you're gonna pace everything this year. So this is kind of a quick guide looking to do some backwards planning. If you can decide upfront how much time you have to spend on National History Day. Some teachers like to break it out over a really long period of time, spend several months getting into all of the different aspects and kind of work a little bit of time every week on National History Day, along with covering other content. Some people, we call it down and dirty here in Idaho, where they just spend all their time in 6 to 8 weeks really getting through all of their National History Day project. And the same way of doing things doesn't work for every classroom and every teacher. So you want to decide what works for you. So this part is just an example of how you would look at covering the process in 6, 10, or 15 weeks. And you don't have to do 6, 10, or 15. These are just examples of how much time you would pace yourself. So let's kind of get started looking at how you would plan. So the first thing you want to determine is the deadline for your regional contest. You should be hearing soon, if you haven't already, from your coordinator and your regional coordinators about deadlines for the contest season. Normally mid-February is a pretty good time to estimate when your deadline will be, and then you can count backwards how many weeks you have from when you want to start to cover the National History Day process. This year, I really want to encourage you to give yourself some wiggle room. Surprise! I'm sure you're shocked to hear this. But since we really don't know what's going to happen with COVID, Whether kids will be in school or not during a lot of the winter, it's so hard to know right now. So I really recommend that you give yourself a couple weeks of cushion so that you're not freaking out at the end of the process, or January comes and you just feel like you can't do National History Day at all because you didn't give yourself enough time. So make sure you have a time cushion there. The first part of the process is learning about National History Day and the annual theme. We have a theme every year to help create a lens where students can focus their research and analyze their topic using that lens. This year, our theme is Communication in History, the Key to Understanding. And I would estimate that you need just about a week, but you can do it in a couple of days to help your students learn about the theme, think about the theme, brainstorm topics that might relate to the theme. All of the slides in this PowerPoint will be available to you in Canva. You'll be able to access these later. You can see every year the National History Day Office publishes a theme book where they have scholarly articles and awesome ideas for topics and resources you can use to help research topics. This is a screenshot of the theme narrative, which is kind of a description of the theme that goes into detail. This year we have a theme video that talks about the theme that's really, really interesting, suggests different topics and different ways to look at the theme, and you can share that with students. We really want to focus our workshop this month on virtual instruction and how you can get through the process virtually. I love the idea of giving your students videos and reading that they can do outside of class, so you can use your instruction time, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or in person, as effectively as possible by having discussions and giving feedback and really making connections with your students rather than doing all of the instruction. You can let videos and reading help to supplement that. So these theme materials are really helpful. Next up, your students will be exploring different topic ideas and picking what their topic will be. You can do this quickly, or you can take a couple weeks and let your students do a little bit of research on some topics before they decide what their topic will be. We're going to get more into this part of the research process next Tuesday in our session then. Okay, next up is the fun part of the process, which is actual research. This should take anywhere from 5 weeks to, you could probably do it in 2, but I would not do less than 2 weeks on their research. Students will start by doing background research and coming to learn about their time period, and then move their way into looking at primary sources and really getting into primary sources on their topic and analyzing them. Next, after all the fun research, students will be developing a historical argument about their topic. This involves a thesis statement and then proving their argument through their project that they've created and talking about the historical significance of their topic. Our big question in National History Day is always, so what? Who cares? Why does it matter that Jackie Robinson played baseball? Right? Why does it matter that Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation? Students have to prove that with their project. And this can take a couple of weeks, but you could do it in one to really help students focus their argument. Next up, and we'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks as well. Next up is actually organizing and doing the writing and planning for your project. This can take 1 week or 2 weeks. This is the time where students are writing, and you're giving them feedback to help them perfect their argument, and they're outlining how they're going to prove their argument. This is a graphic organizer to help students plan their documentary. We have all kinds of tools like this for all of the categories, and you can find those in Canvas. And then finally is the fun part where students get to create their projects and actually put everything together. You want to plan 1 to 3 weeks on entry creation so that your students have plenty of time to put all of their creativity into their project. You probably already know, but the truth is if students have a really good outline and have done all their writing in advance, they can pretty quickly put their project together. But since this is a really fun part of the project for students, this is, you can take a little bit more time with this. Part of creating your project is also submitting an annotated bibliography and a process paper with your project. Christine, if you want to move ahead. The process paper is just 500 words on how you did your project, what your argument was, just to kind of give the judges an insight into how you worked, and it's part of the verification process of proving that this is all your work and you understand the argument that you made. And then the annotated bibliography is really important to show judges your research and where you got your information and how you came to understand your topic. So that is the National History Day process very quickly. So now that you kind of have seen the process, you can set for yourself the time, count how many weeks you want to put towards National History Day, and then pace each section out that way. Next slide, Christine. You then want to create a calendar. I'm a hyper organized person, so of course I'm dying right now because you can't plan more than a week in advance at the moment. But really I encourage you to map out a calendar, add the milestones that you want students to reach at every point in the process, and figure out what you're going to grade, how you're going to assess students, and do all of that legwork now at the front end so that you're ready to just go when it's time. Any questions about planning out the research process in your classroom? It's so quiet.
I have a question, and pardon if there's background noise. My husband's watching hockey, and my earphones are in a pod. But I'm also stepping into We the People, and I guess just that overlap time. If I don't want to do, I forget the term that you used, like a crunch time. You know, knowing if Christine, I remember you had suggested this summer that maybe when it's your first year, you don't necessarily have to be in the contests per se, just do it school-wide and community, which would be my plan for this year.
Yeah.
If the We the People, the simulated congressional hearing is going to be held at the end of the first semester, somewhere along there, do I not even touch this until?
So I generally in my own classroom did not start History Day until January. It was a really good way to like reel them back in after the long winter break. Because they were, you know, there was a lot going on. We often had snow days. It was a really great way to keep them focused because they loved it. So for me, I always started it in January, and that worked out really well for our contest time here in Nevada. And I think I think you have to do what works for you. And I think this year that is the rule for all teachers across the nation. You do what works for you, and we are here to support you, however that is.
I actually vaguely remember you saying that. And then we also have a spring AI project that we're supposed to do because we're an arts integration school. And this is perfect to meld with that. So this
absolutely. Yeah.
So that was kind of my thought. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the great thing about History Day is I think everyone does a project, right? Everyone does a research project. It's part of everyone's standards across the country. But this gives you a framework for that project, right? It's not so open-ended, and it gives you some really specific things to look for and for students to do. So you fit it in where it works for you. Absolutely.
Yeah, and for sure, like we talk about the contest, but really that's the sprinkles and the cherry on top. But the delicious chocolate cupcake is doing the work and doing the research and getting into primary sources, and we support you whatever you're doing to make it work for you.
Yeah, I was going to add one of the things that I used to do with a really similar like content calendar like this, I would actually make a table of contents for my students, and I would leave a couple of blank spaces. So one was they had to write in the due date of whatever, that, like, so if we're looking at the rulebook scavenger hunt, they would have to write in their due date. And then they also had to write in what their score, what they thought their score was. Like, did they think that they had accomplished this, that enough that they could move on? So I did a lot of self-grading because I had middle schoolers and I had 5 classes of 36. And so to actually physically grade every single thing they wrote down would have taken me years to do. And I wanted to keep moving with History Day. So I had a lot of self-reflection. And that really, really helped. So I can upload a sample of what I used to do in Canvas for you all. And it was really, really helpful because they were also able to really say, yeah, you're right, I probably should redo that. I'm not quite ready to move on. I mean, granted, not all of them did that because they were 12, let's be real. But it was really helpful to keep them in line with me because it is a pretty big project and so much of it is self-directed.
And we have lots of, a step-by-step guide for planning your calendar and other tools in Canvas that you can check out and adapt to make work for you. Cool. Oh yeah, one more thing. Okay, do you see the adorableness happening right here? This student, his name is Sean Batchu. He's from Idaho, and he did his project on the Cuban Missile Crisis. And one of our big goals with National History Day is making history relevant to students. I mean, that's like, every humanities teacher's dream is to help students connect. And Sean made it all the way to the national contest, which is at the University of Maryland. And he was having lunch in a sandwich shop and met this nice gentleman, overheard him talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it turned out he was a sailor on the ship that was on its way to Cuba, to the Bay of Pigs. And this gentleman introduced himself. You can see Shum's little face is just like so thrilled. And he ended up spending a couple of hours at the sandwich shop talking with this gentleman. And every teacher, everyone who participates in National History Day has a million of these stories because going through this research process, getting to see the primary sources really does make history relevant. And they're able to make connections that most students don't get to have. So I know it seems daunting when we've just talked about the calendar, but don't give up. You can have these amazing experiences with your students. Also, a big part of National History Day, and probably, I mean, for me, this is one of the most important 21st century skills, is students are able to determine what's real and what's fake. Learning how to evaluate sources, learning how to analyze information really helps students to determine how they can learn about anything that they care about. I know that we always get really concerned about content. I've got to cover all this content. I don't know if I have time to do this deep dive project with my kids. But what they're really getting is those skills that they need to successfully navigate learning in the age of the internet. There's so much fake stuff out there. But you're giving them lifelong skills that will help them be able to learn about anything they care about in their future life. So these were 2 plugs to help you keep feeling like, yes, I can do this and I want to do this.
Okay, I'm going to take the next section, and I get the most boring information of the night. So I'm just going to ask you to stick with me here. We're going to talk about the contest, the structures, and a little History Day math. So, and this is going to vary a little bit amongst our 3 states, but not a ton. So most kids will start out at a local contest. It might be a school district or a regional contest. In Utah, if a school is participating, or if a regional has a lot of schools participating, then the schools will do a contest or some kind of event at the school and then just send their best projects from the school to the region. And then in other places, the school can send all of their projects to the region. That's something you need to verify with your local coordinator to know how many projects you can send into the contest, into your local contest. And again, backwards plan from that first registration deadline for your first contest, but also realize that registering kids into the contest just means that you need to know who's going to attend, who's going to compete. There is probably still going to be time for them to continue working on their projects after that registration deadline. That's again something that you need to look into for your local contest so that you're aware of when the registrations are due and then when the projects are due, and then use those dates to backwards plan. And a note, because there are going to be virtual contests this year, and they might not all be virtual, but there will be some that are. In Utah, we haven't quite made up our minds yet. So a virtual contest may mean earlier project due dates, because a virtual contest usually takes more days to run and get the judging done. So that's just something to have in your mind when you're thinking about your backwards planning. The state, the best projects from the regionals or districts advance up to the state or affiliate contests, which are typically in April and early May. Those are the dates that you see for our 3 states right there. And then from the state level, we get to send our best 2 entries in each category on to the national contest. That is currently scheduled for June 13th through 17th. And it's either going to be at the University of Maryland in College Park, or it's going to be held virtually. And that decision won't be made for a while yet. So again, be prepared. Be prepared for anything. Next slide. Okay, here's the History Day math. We have 5 creative categories and 3 age divisions. And if you multiply them all together, you end up with 27. And I'll explain how that works. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So our 5 creative categories, if you are new to History Day, this is one of the ways that we engage students really well, because they have creative choice. And so they can choose a category that meets their creative interests. So we offer a documentary category where students will make a 10-minute documentary film, just like Ken Burns. And this is a great category for kids who enjoy filmmaking or media or technology, or they want to learn how to do those things. In terms of the content of those projects, they are really great for using historic images, photos, TV clips, movie clips, interview clips, things like that. All right, next. The exhibit category, this is probably the one that everybody thinks of when they think of this kind of competition, and it is a popular category. It's great for students who enjoy visual arts and creating mixed media and 3D displays. It's great, usually it's great for topics that have good historic images or interesting documents. Artifacts, kids will often use those in an exhibit project, but I would say that with this year's virtual contingencies, artifacts might be harder to use because these projects, if they are submitting them to a virtual contest, the projects will be submitted as digitally, so as photographs or something like that. And we will have good complete details on all of those submission guidelines. The performance category, you know these kids, you have them in your class, the ones who love theater, who love music, who like set design. These projects are also really great for using artifacts and images, also speech, like historic speeches, that kind of thing. So they lend themselves to those things. Next one. The website category. This is a category where students take their research and they build a website to showcase and display their arguments and their sources. So kids who are interested in web design, in media and technology, this is a good category for them. It's great for showcasing a variety of historic images, documents. They can embed audio and video clips into it, so it's quite versatile. There is a required web builder that kids must use in order to enter an NHD project in the website category. and it's called NHD Web Central. And it is a completely secured system that they can build their websites in. And there's no, student privacy is protected, and it's not searchable. One more thing I wanted to say quickly about websites is it is a really good category if you have low-income kids who may have a difficult time with supplies, because there are not supplies involved in the web. It's free to use the web builder. All right. And then papers. We still have a category for papers, and kids enter it every year. So there are lots of kids who really enjoy writing, and this is a great category for them. It's it lends itself well to historic documents, using historic documents and images, but kids are not able to use video or audio if they choose this category. Okay, moving on. Here is our math problem. So we have 5 creative categories, and we have 3 age divisions. Youth is 4th and 5th grade, junior is 6th through 8th, senior is 9th through 12th. So students will compete in the age division of the grade that they are in. Now, where we get to 27 is that kids can compete as an individual or as part of a group. And in 4 of the creative categories, we offer individual versus group, and they're judged separately. And then there's only 1 category that is only for individual contestants, and that's the paper category. So as you are thinking about whether you, how to handle kind of kids working on their own versus kids working in groups, I think a couple of things to keep in mind with the virtual settings that we're all facing this year is that larger groups might be very difficult to manage, and so you may want to limit group size. The NHD rules will allow a group to be from 2 to 5 students. And you are welcome to have group sizes of whatever range or whatever size in that range, but just be thoughtful about the way you set this up, because I do think if kids are having to work together remotely, a smaller group will work better. If kids want to do a performance, a group performance, a smaller group may work better. And the other thing to know about group and individual is that your students do need to decide this right at the beginning, whether they're going to work alone or whether they will do a group project. It's fine if a group drops a student out somewhere along the line, but a student cannot be added to a group after they have started doing the work, because we want all of the students in the group to participate in doing the work. And that can become the most of an issue with group performances. If a student drops out and they have built a role into their performance for that student, then they have to kind of scramble to find a way to fill that gap. So those are things to keep in mind about the groups. So with our 9 different competition categories and our 3 age divisions, if all of those filled at our contest, we would end up running 27 different categories that are judged separately from each other. Okay, next slide. Let's see. I have kind of touched on most of this. We are, National History Day, the organization is working on submission standards for digital projects for virtual contests. They are not quite ready, but the minute that they are, your coordinators will get that information out to you. It's really easy for students to submit papers, websites, and documentaries in a digital form, because you know, websites and documentaries, they're going to be created as a digital product anyway. It is a little bit trickier to do a performance, but they'll be able to make a recording of doing a performance and submit that. And then exhibits, there are probably going to be a couple of options for how they could submit an exhibit in a digital format. So stay tuned for details on that. Just be aware that it's something that we're working on. We talked about group size. We talked about planning ahead and allowing some cushion in case you know, a contest becomes virtual in a way that you weren't expecting. And then just know that through this whole series, and as well as through our resources on Canvas, we're building a lot of tools this year to assist you teaching NHD in that online or blended environment. As Christine said, so much of this work is student directed anyway. This program can work well in this kind of setting. Okay, and I get to talk about some important new things in the NHD rulebook and in our judging criteria sheet. You can advance the slide. There we go. So, oh, that looks so strange on my screen, all the way full. So this is what the cover looks like of our brand new contest rulebook. We did, NHD did release a new revised edition, went into effect this summer. If you've done NHD before, please go and throw away all of your old rule books because this one is substantially changed. There are two things I want to say today because we'll come back and get into a little more detail on rules. And it's kind of how you're going to use the rule book as you work with your students. And I think it's important to know that you're going to want to use the rule book early and use parts of it early. And then you'll want to set it aside and come back to it later as students begin to create their projects. So there is a new section in this edition of the rulebook that is basically set up to be a guidebook. And it's designed to help you and the students understand the judging criteria and the research process and what the expectations are. So that's something that you'll want to consult and teach early in the process and then use as a reference. And then, but I would not get into any nitty-gritties on category rules until they start to build. And then that's when you'll want to have them back in that rule book, making sure that they make exhibits that are the right size, or that they understand what the word limits are in a website project, that kind of thing. So you'll need to hit it 2 different times with different purposes through your process. Okay. And so here is a rundown of our new and greatly improved judging criteria sheet. The new sheets have some new criteria, and some of it's just reframed and uses different language, and some of it is actually new. And then you will be probably happy to find that the new judging sheets are designed to be a rubric, so that will look familiar to you and to students when they receive judges' feedback. I have marked brand new things with a yellow tab here on the side. So something that's new is the historical argument criteria. And we're looking for students to make an argument based on their own analysis of the evidence that they discovered during their research. And tied into that is theme connection, that we are looking for students to make meaningful connections to the theme throughout their project. Wide research, that isn't new and that hasn't changed much, but we're looking for a variety of sources that are credible, that are both primary and secondary. And this is my own note, you know, to students, just a reminder that not to rely on Wikipedia as a secondary source. It's a terrific bridge, but we really want them to be moving past Wikipedia pretty quickly in their research. Primary sources should perform the evidence that supports their argument. Ideally, we're helping students move from just looking at pictures as primary sources to analyzing them. Historical context, this is not a new criterion, but we can prompt that each project needs to show what the relevant historical context is for the topic, setting the stage so that the project can show change over time. Multiple perspectives, this is new, and it's a reframing of what we used to call balanced research. This is much more specific about what we're looking for. We're looking for students to use sources that show or represent different perspectives on their topic. and show that the project shows different sides of the story, that they're not arguing, for or against the Second Amendment, that if they're looking at a topic that, like that one, that involved a debate, that they're going to explore both sides of that debate. Okay, next slide. Historical accuracy, significance, those are not new. Student voice is new. And here we are really trying to emphasize to students that we want to hear them present the information in their own voice and make sure that their ideas, their analysis, their argument are clearly presented in their own words, rather than relying on experts to tell the story for them. And then clarity of presentation. Again, this is where judges will assess the technical merits, are there writing or editing mistakes, that kind of thing, organization and logic. Okay, so those are the new criteria, and I'm going to toss it over to Christine. Before I do, I went through a lot of stuff really fast. Should we have questions? Yeah. Stephanie, you're muted.
I didn't have a question. I just had the camera in the wrong direction.
Okay.
I just wanted, while people are typing questions, if they have, to shout out, if you're not planning on doing contests, like I think Laura, you had talked about earlier, you weren't sure you were going to do contests. The judges' evaluation forms can still guide your assessment of your students and help them to self-assess too about whether they feel like they've done a good project.
Okay. So we're going to talk really quickly, because we're getting close on time, about how, so this is how I sort of framed History Day in my classroom. I framed it as my students were the storytellers in history, and it really worked well for my students. And so I am switching over to a different slide presentation, because we're going to share this one with you because it's fun and engaging for kids. Not that the other one wasn't fun. Johanna found some really cute slides, like such teachers we are, right? So like the teacher, all that. So I love storytelling. I think it's exactly what History Day is. It's story. It's telling somebody's story that we may or may not know. I tend to find that students who get so into History Day often are the ones who have picked the unknown stories, right? Like it's really, really easy for students to pick George Washington because they've been learning about him since kindergarten. But that is not as fun as learning about somebody completely new, or an event that they've never heard of, or something that maybe they heard of from their family a really long time ago, an event that a family member might have been on the periphery of, and then they get to dig into it. That is the coolest part of History Day. So just some quick housekeeping. This part's interactive, and I hope you will engage. And I'm gonna go quickly because I wanna respect your time today. But again, like I said, I'm gonna give you all of this. So when you see this little icon over here, I would love for you to communicate either through the chat or unmute yourself. And I say communicate because that's our theme this year. So we're trying to work that in a little bit. And my goal for today with you guys is to look at the power of storytelling and how it can bring history to life for our students. Okay, and I think this quote is just exactly what History Day does. It brings history from behind the glass case and helps us to understand what's outside of the case. I just think that's it. I love it. So why does history matter? So before we can really think about why history matters, we need to understand what history actually is. So I'd love to hear a shout out of words that you see in this definition, this dictionary definition of history, that when you think about storytelling or you think about History Day, what resonates with you here in this definition? In the chat, because I see some people. Human affairs, actions matter, eventful past considered as a whole. I love it. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so events, a series of events, right? A person, there's so much to history, and that I think is pretty magical. So I just want you to take a minute. We're only going to do the top one because we don't have a lot of time, but in class, this could be a really cool progression for students to see how they were involved in something that was their state and then the country, right? Or so it's a little bit of helping them to dig into how they relate to a topic. So I just want you to think about the history of you. Is there something that's happened to you in your life that has impacted your life? And what was the result of that event, and how has it affected your decision making today? So is there anything that has happened? It doesn't have to be like really dramatic. It can be something super simple. Anyone want to unmute and share? We're tired. It's Thursday. It's like maybe week 1 of school or maybe week 4, and we're tired. I get it.
Christy says she participated in NHD in high school, and I think that's a perfect example.
Ah, perfect. Yes, and it's changed how you just make decisions today in your own classroom because you realize the power of such a cool program. I love that. Oh my gosh, that is so cool. I'm going to share a story with you guys in just a little bit. There's a puppy barking in the background here. Sorry about that, everybody. So in your classroom, it would be really cool for you to help students to see how an event that they were a part of, then how that impacted their state and how that impacted their country. And you could go the backwards route too. You could start with an event that happened in the country. And so you could easily do a current event like coronavirus, right? So in our country, things started to shut down. And then in our state, our governors and our mayors, they decided to shut things down even more. And how did that affect you? While we're going to the next slide, I'm going to close the door. So the reason why that's so important is because if we don't know about our history, we are a tree without roots. And that's one of the things that we want students to understand is that part of this storytelling adventure that they're taking with History Day is that they are putting themselves in that story somehow, right? They're finding their connections to that story. Obviously, they're not all going to find every, something that their family was, involved in, but somehow how do they connect to that story? Whether it's a story about our country, it's a story about immigration, and they had a family member who immigrated, that kind of thing is what is just so powerful about it. Okay. So switching gears a little bit back into storytelling, we're gonna do some interesting information about stories. So 50% of all Hollywood movies follow essentially the same plot. And this is a really fun activity that you can do with kids, and we are not going to make you all go do it today, but it would be really fun. So if you've never used Flipgrid, it's a really, really cool website where you do video responses. So instead of asking them to respond on a discussion board or maybe on a Padlet or something, you can ask the students to do a video, and it's closed so that if your students are doing a video as a teacher, you can control it where nobody else can access it. It's safe, but double check with your school district that it's on the approved list. But so this could be a really cool activity to get them into the mode of storytelling. Is for them to tell the story of a movie they recently saw. What did they like about it? What stood out to them? Was it a story that they'd heard before? Was it similar to something else? And so the intent of that would be that then you'd have, I don't know, maybe 36, maybe 40 different stories about different movies. And chances are some of them have seen very similar movies and they will have very similar stories because there are only so many plots in this world. And if any of you are English teachers as well or librarians, you know that the many, many stories are the same story, right? How many times can Romeo and Juliet be told? And so the reasons why stories have these stories that are told over and over again is because they're the stories that are good and they make us more empathetic. They can activate a fight or flight response. They can access parts of our brain that we don't use all the time because of the sensory details in them. And sometimes storytelling can be the only way to change someone's mind. So you can give them lots of facts and figures. I know as a former government teacher, I can give people all sorts of information about the government, but as soon as I start storytelling, then they start to bring down their guard a little bit and listen, right? So that's kind of a really powerful thing. And a few more facts, and I am going to provide you guys this article because it's a really cool article. It's all these facts about storytelling. And so this one I love. So if you have administrators who are struggling with understanding why you're digging into a project like this, these are the kinds of things that you can really give them to help them understand that it actually will help them to become better students. We also have a really great study called NHD Works, that with an article like this and the NHD Works, I used to just give this to my principal every time. She was kind of like, why are we doing this History Day thing again? It's taking up the hallways. And then she would say, oh yeah, that's right, because the kids are growing in their social emotional learning, but they're also growing in their content skills and their lifelong skills. So definitely use things like this if you need to. Okay. Think so. So one of the things that I really like to present to the kids when I start this project is that I tell them that my job as their history teacher is to be a storyteller and tell them the stories of history. And then I say, but so like I mentioned earlier when Laura asked, I used to start this project in January. And so I'd say, so guys, I was thinking over holiday break, and I think it's time for you to take over. I have a lot going on and it's time for you to take over, and you're going to be the storytellers now. So I want you to pick the stories that you want to learn about, and you're going to tell those stories. So for the next 6 weeks, we're going to focus in, and you are going to become the storytellers. And at the end, you're going to share your story with the whole school, because then it didn't make them feel as stressed that because we did that as a whole school, and they had to exchange with other kids in the school. And they're like, I don't want to tell an 8th grader about my project. So that became a something that they were very nervous about. My ELL students really struggled, and my special ed students really struggled. So when I kind of took it back and said, you're just going to tell the stories. You're going to tell the story of this amazing piece of history. And it somehow changed the narrative in their minds. So we asked you to read a couple of student papers, and I know that not all of you got to them, and that's okay, but a lot of you have experience with History Day. So I would love for you to share a little bit about student storytellers and things that you have liked about the stories that students tell through NHD. What maybe a topic that you didn't know before that a student picked. How how was the theme connection, and how easy it was for you to recognize the theme connection, or maybe where you saw need for improvement, that kind of stuff. So share in the chat, or unmute yourself. Be brave, unmute yourself. Laura, the hero's journey, yes, exactly. The hero's journey is the main one, right? That's the main storyteller that we all know. Almost all books are the hero's journey, right? Stephanie, I totally agree. I think that's where my storytelling experience comes from. It comes from my grandma. Both my grandmas, they told me stories my whole childhood, and I think that's why I became a social studies teacher, to be honest, because I loved hearing their stories, and they were so good about all those really cool stories about our family. And my grandma always used to tell the story about how my family came over on the Oregon Trail, and like that made me love westward expansion because I had a connection to it, right? Okay, so I'm also a really big quotes person. I love quotes, and I just think that they really invoke a lot of emotion. So that's part of the story. And we want to encourage students to find quotes that invoke the story, right? Because it's so easy to just quote like this huge block of text. And that's what Wendy was just talking about with the student voice, is that we want to pull them away from just like, I've had students literally print an article and paste it on their exhibit board. I'm like, what is that showing me? It's not showing me anything, right? So what we instead want to encourage them to do is to tell their own story and share that with us by using quotes that bring out that piece, but the majority of it is their voice. So that's it. And I will absolutely have a PDF of that in the Canvas course, but I'm going to share a link with you that you can always use so that you can have all the transitions. It's done in a program called Canva. And so if I download it as a PowerPoint, it won't have all the fun transitions, but you can also make it animated if you want it in PowerPoint too. Any questions or thoughts? We're almost done. Wendy, you were going to talk a little bit more about papers, right? Or did you want me to talk about that? There was, you know what? There's another slide. I forgot. Let me get back to it.
I'm glad you remembered, because I cannot remember what we put on that last slide.
You guys, we were saying how different it is to prepare for a virtual course, and I'm sure you're all experiencing this right now. It is so different than preparing in person, right? Because when you're in person, like maybe you're making photocopies, or you've got a binder or a book and you're looking at it, and there's just something different about the physical aspect. And we've met several times and done all of this, but it's definitely different doing it virtually. Okay, there we go.
Oh, right. Okay, I'd be happy to talk about this. You know, we started out with papers for a couple of reasons. I think we want to give you a chance to kind of absorb examples from every category as we go through the course, but every NHD student is a writer. So whatever category they end up doing, they will need to do a lot of writing in the process of creating that project. Even a performance is a writing heavy project. An exhibit is a difficult writing project because they have a limited number of words they can use. So every student is a writer. And, you know, I have a lot of teachers who will start all of the students with writing a paper as kind of a preliminary step. That doesn't work for everybody, but it's certainly an option if it appeals to you. I think the key is that, you know, in the papers we shared with you, I think are a good example of, this is not the same thing as a book report or writing a biography or kind of writing an expanded timeline. We really are wanting to encourage kids to take however many steps they are intellectually capable of taking beyond just reporting this fact, and using that theme to make their own argument and to find and share their own voice about that topic. So book reports are great and timelines are great, but those are really just the first step. Christy has a great question about how you encourage students to step away from Google. That's so great, because honestly, I think it will come as a shock to them that they can do research in other ways. And that's one of the great things that they will take out of this project. One of the things that I recommend from the get-go is to, you know, just not allow them to start on Google at all and direct them to other places like the Gale reference libraries or whatever resources you have in your state. In Utah, all the kids have access to the Gale reference series. The other really valuable thing you can do is teach them how to use Wikipedia wisely. And it can be a great tool during topic selection, and we'll talk about that some more next time. And it's a great way to get a really quick overview of a topic, but it's also a great way to track towards more complex or better sources, but it's not the place where they start and finish. It is a very, very first step.
When I was obviously in person in school, and this may not apply to you this year, depending on what your district has decided or your school, we would start the project off before they could Google anything. They did what we called a library dig, and our librarian would spread a bunch of books out all over the tables and just really let them literally dig in there. She had an acronym, and they had a little half sheet of paper, and they had to write a few things about each book. And she would actually have them dig. So if you are virtual this year and your libraries are still closed, like ours are here, I would suggest doing a carousel of something similar where you provide them some different websites, like the Library of Congress or the Chronicling America website, those kinds of websites, and give them some really clear boundaries of what to look for on those sites. And I think we have an actual topic selection kind of thing like that for next week, that it's an acronym that you can have them do. But I would have them get away from Googling things and send them to those websites you want them on. And then that way they've already started their research in a good place. And if then they go back to Google, that's fine, but then they already have some really solid places that they can start with. Definitely.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of you have pointed out school librarians are an awesome resource to help you get your student researchers off and running. And they have so many tools for you. Your school librarian can be your best friend during National History Day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that they would love to come and Zoom into your class or Google Meet into your class or Teams into your, or whatever you're using. I'm sure they would love to join you. And every librarian I've ever known has been more than happy to teach a lesson or help you write a lesson. And that's what I did with my librarian, is I just partnered with her and I said, if I'm going to do this, I can't do it alone. And she ran with it and loved it. And we, in fact, got my entire social studies department on board. And so then it was great because she was kind of the ringleader, right? So she would pull in each class and she would make sure that everybody was doing the same thing to kick it off. And then we do like a midpoint check-in. She would clear her calendar for a month and a half to have us in the library, in and out of there. She loved it. And I think if you give them that kind of ability, it takes some of that off of you. And then they're checking off a bunch of standards that they're required to do too. So if you have a school librarian that can help you, if you don't have access to one because COVID has changed everything for all schools, let's be real, contact your local library. I bet you they're doing a lot of digital things because they probably aren't open yet, but their librarians still need to work and do things. I know here in Washoe County, where I live in Reno, we actually have one librarian up at the Northwest Library that's dedicated to the Holocaust resource section, all genocide and Holocaust stuff. There's one person who's dedicated to that. So I always send kids to her whenever they're doing that topic. I just say, hey, contact Ms. Johnson. She knows. She will help you find all the resources. And so just reach out to your local public libraries. They'll probably help you too. Mm-hmm. And then special collections at your university, the special collections department, they can really help you with some local history if you have students doing local history.
Yeah, one of my biggest districts in Utah, the whole program is run by the librarians. They're the ones that launched it and they're the anchors of the whole thing. So yeah, your librarian should love this. I want to just briefly address Stephanie's comment because she works with about 90% Native American student population. We have a school in southern Utah on the Navajo Nation, and every single student last year did some topic involving Native history. And it was so powerful for those kids because it was not, we had lots of Navajo code talkers, and I love Navajo code talkers, especially when the kids are able to go interview an elder in their community. But we also had Jim Thorpe, and we had Native American astronauts, and we had Wes Studi, who, the kids so connected with the ability to really research a range of topics relating to heritage. So
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
if you give them the tools, they will love it.
Yeah, I had a student about 7 years ago who actually came to nationals with me. It was the first time him and his mom had even left Nevada. They lived on the reservation out here at Pyramid Lake, and he did his project on the Alcatraz, the
Occupation.
Yes, occupation, thank you. And that was the year before the Native American Special Prize came out, or it came out 2 years later. And he was so upset, he actually wrote into National History Day and suggested that they have a special prize for Native American research. And so a couple years later, I ran into a teacher of his, and I told them, and he was so proud. And, it may or may not have been him, but I think that's again, like going back to that storytelling idea. If kids can connect it to themselves in some way, it is so much more powerful, because so many of our students, especially kids with diverse backgrounds, don't see themselves in history ever. And this is a really, really cool opportunity for them to see themselves in history. So definitely encourage your students, Stephanie. I would love for your students to do projects. And your little guys can participate too. We're gonna start a youth division in Nevada. So the younger kids in your district can participate too, which I would love to help you with.
I haven't decided which grade I'm going to use it with, because I do 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12. So I know it won't be my 12th graders, because they're playing in We the People this year.
Yeah, no, you're not your 12th graders, but your 10th and 11th, we can definitely help them. And I'm here to help with anything. So
Yeah, and my 11th grade class, every one of them's in the National Honor Society. They're an awesome group of young men. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards.
that's
So
awesome.
hopefully that'll be something we can work with.
Yeah. Nicole, I'm so glad you're still using ABC Clio. That's great. It's a site that our state library pays for us. So we have a lot of access to it, and they've been a great supporter of History Day over the years too. That's great. Any other questions? No, you guys are done. It's Thursday. You almost made it through the week.
It's a Friday, so soon.
Yay!
We're so excited to be meeting with you guys over the next few weeks. And I know today was a lot of just like information. And now that we kind of all know that background about National History Day, we're excited to do a lot more like interactive activities and practicing on each other in the future, in our future sessions. If you do have any questions or have any challenges with Canvas, just let us know, and we will plan on seeing you on Tuesday at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
All right, thanks you guys. Have a good night.
It was really helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura.
Hey, Allison.
Thank you. You guys.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.